The first light of Kestrel 9 stretched across the jagged horizon, painting the dusty plains in shades of gold and red. The wind carried grit that stung the skin and choked the lungs, yet Elias Rowe had learned long ago to live with it. The planet was harsh, unforgiving, and forgotten by most of humanity, but it was his home. He leaned against the rough wood of his barn, eyes scanning the empty stretch beyond his ranch. The wind carried a whisper of movement, soft but distinct, a sound out of place in the lonely silence of the desert. Elias' hand moved instinctively to the side of his belt, where a small, worn holster held his blaster. His horse, the last of his genetically engineered herd, pawed nervously nearby. It was a creature of strength and endurance, bred to survive Kestrel 9's extreme conditions, and the only companion Elias had left since the death of his wife years ago. The horse's dark eyes met his, reflecting both trust and shared caution. Then, from the swirling dust, a figure emerged. At first, Elias thought it might be one of the scavengers who roamed the plains, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was unlike anything he had ever seen. A girl, small and fragile, stumbled across the desert floor. Her skin shimmered faintly under the sun, a subtle silver-blue glow that seemed unnatural to the harsh light. Her legs faltered and she fell to the ground, coughing violently. Elias didn't hesitate. He mounted his horse and rode toward her, the familiar weight of his weapon replaced by the urgent need to help. When he reached her, he dismounted and knelt beside the trembling alien girl. Her eyes were wide and fearful, a swirl of violet and green that seemed to shift as she blinked. "Are you hurt?" Elias asked, keeping his voice calm. She looked at him but didn't respond, only trembling harder as if sensing the danger that still lurked beyond the dunes. He noticed marks on her skin, tiny, patterned burns that looked like some sort of tracking device. Whoever had pursued her had left a trail of pain and terror. Elias glanced toward the horizon. The desert was empty now, but he knew the trackers would not stop easily. He had heard rumors of alien fugitives being hunted, of small nomadic species caught in wars they did not start. And yet something about this girl told him she was not just a victim. She carried intelligence, cunning, and a strength that belied her small frame. He offered his hand. "You need to move. I can get you somewhere safe." As he cleaned the wounds on her arm and legs, he noticed something that made him pause. The burns were not simple injuries. They were ceremonial, almost symbolic, like a mark of identity or allegiance. "What are you?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. The girl did not answer. She only watched him, eyes sharp and calculating. She seemed to weigh his words, his presence, and his intentions all at once. Elias realized she was not merely scared, she was assessing him just as he had assessed her. In that moment he understood this was no ordinary alien refugee. He heard the distant hum of engines. His chest tightened. Whoever was hunting her was close now, using technology that could track life signs across miles of desert. Elias glanced at his horse, then back at the girl. The choice he faced was brutal. The horse was his last. Without it, he had no means to transport goods, no way to survive the harsh desert, no leverage to continue living as he had for years. It was more than a companion, it was his lifeline, yet he knew there was no other way. "You'll have to take her," Elias muttered to himself, almost in disbelief. He led the girl out of the barn and toward the waiting horse. The girl's eyes widened when she saw it. She approached cautiously, running her hand over its mane, as if sensing the loyalty and strength within the creature. Elias saddled the horse and helped the girl climb onto its back. "Hold on," he said. She did, gripping the reins with a firm, determined grasp. He whispered a command to the horse, one it recognized instantly, and the animal surged forward, its powerful legs eating up the distance between them and the approaching threat. He watched her disappear into the morning haze, heart pounding, knowing that he had just given away everything he had. The horse that had carried him through countless storms, through danger and despair, was gone. And yet he did not feel regret, not entirely. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing that his last act of worth had been for someone else, a stranger whose fate was now tied to his decision. As the dust settled, the hum of the engines drew nearer. Elias turned back to see a group of small, sleek ships descending toward his ranch. Figures emerged, moving with grace and precision. They were humanoid like the girl, but taller, more imposing, and adorned with intricate armor that glimmered in the early sunlight. Their presence radiated authority, control, and an unspoken warning. Elias raised his hands, but the aliens made no hostile move. Instead, they paused, scanning the empty plains and his modest ranch. One of them stepped forward, her eyes meeting his with a sharp intelligence. She spoke, but the words were not human. They resonated in his mind, a direct impression rather than sound. "Why did you give her your last life?" "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally, his voice steady despite the fear twisting in his chest. The alien tilted her head, studying him. Her companions shifted, whispering among themselves in a language of subtle vibrations. Elias realized that these were not simple soldiers or hunters. They were sisters, part of a lineage that valued honor and duty above all else. His act, seemingly small and foolish, had unsettled them. It had violated their expectations, their understanding of what any being would do in a moment of desperation. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert, yet the aliens remained. They watched Elias move about his homestead, repairing fences, tending the small crops he had managed to grow, maintaining the barn as though performing a ritual. They did not speak again, but their attention was constant, silent, and unyielding. Elias worked in silence as well, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the girl riding across the plains on his horse, vulnerable yet protected by the creature he had nurtured. He thought of the consequences he might face. These were not ordinary aliens. They were beings of immense influence with reach far beyond Kestrel 9. And yet he did not fear them. Fear was useless. Survival required action, decisions, and sometimes sacrifice. As night approached, the horizon glowed with a pale purple light. The aliens gathered together, their forms blending with the shadows, watching the land as if marking it for some unseen purpose. Elias knew this was only the beginning. He had stepped into a story far larger than himself, one that would challenge not only his survival, but the survival of everyone he cared for. He sat on the edge of the barn, staring at the fading light, and whispered into the wind, "I hope I did the right thing." And somewhere the sisters waited, patient and unyielding, for the next sunrise. When the first stars appeared, Elias climbed into his bedroll, exhausted but alert. He could not sleep, for the hum of distant engines lingered in his mind, and the memory of the girl's eyes haunted him. He had given away his last horse, but in that act, he had proven something the universe had not expected. Humans were capable of courage and compassion beyond calculation, and even in the most desperate circumstances, they could act with honor. The night passed slowly, the desert quiet except for the occasional wind that stirred the dust. And as the first light of dawn broke over Kestrel 9, Elias knew the future would arrive with it, whether it brought salvation, conflict, or something entirely unimaginable. He only knew one thing for certain. He had set a chain of events into motion, and nothing, not even the vast expanse of space itself, could undo what had been started by a human willing to give everything for another. The sun rose over the plains of Kestrel 9, casting long shadows across Elias Rowe's small homestead. The dust swirled in golden spirals, and the air shimmered with heat, yet the silence of the desert felt different now. It was not just the quiet of isolation, but a quiet that carried anticipation. Elias sensed it before he saw it, a presence approaching, deliberate and measured, impossible to ignore. From the distant horizon, silhouettes emerged. At first, they seemed like mirages, tall, elegant figures walking with purpose across the sun-baked earth. As they drew nearer, Elias' heart tightened. There were 3 of them, all humanoid in shape, but unlike anything he had ever seen. Their skin glimmered faintly in the sunlight, silver blue like the girl he had saved, but their height and bearing made them appear regal, almost otherworldly. The sisters had arrived. Elias stepped forward, his mind racing. Who were these beings? What did they want? He had expected enemies, hunters, mercenaries, the kind of threat that could be measured and fought, but these were different. They did not carry weapons in the usual sense. Their armor was smooth and seamless, reflecting light in strange patterns that seemed to make them shimmer, like water in sunlight. There was a calm authority in their movements, and every step they took seemed deliberate, as though the ground itself acknowledged their presence. One of the sisters stopped a few meters from the barn and raised her hand, a simple gesture that seemed to communicate more than words ever could. Elias froze, unsure if he should reach for his blaster or simply stand still. The sister's eyes locked with his, and he felt rather than heard her question, "Why did you give her your last life?" Elias swallowed hard. His voice caught, but he spoke, hoping his words would convey what actions alone could not. Because it was the right thing to do. No being with such logic, strategy, or survival instinct would give away their final advantage without expectation. And yet here he stood, a human, having done exactly that. The sisters spoke again, not with words but with impressions that flowed directly into his mind. They were curious, intrigued, and cautious. Elias felt the weight of their scrutiny, as if every thought, every decision he had ever made was being measured. "You have destabilized our understanding," one of them conveyed. Elias blinked. He had not intended to, but now he understood. In giving his last horse to the girl, he had created a ripple that reached beyond the desert, beyond Kestrel 9, and into the lives of beings whose reach spanned the stars. The sisters moved closer, gliding rather than walking. Their presence was commanding but not hostile. Elias noticed small, intricate devices along their armor, pulsing with energy he could not begin to comprehend. They scanned his homestead, the fences, the crops, and the barn. Nothing was overlooked. And yet they did not destroy, they did not demand, they observed. Hours passed. Elias worked as he always did, feeding livestock, tending his small garden, maintaining the barn. The sisters followed silently, their attention unwavering. He did not attempt to hide his life from them. There was nothing to hide, not anymore. He realized that to them, honesty and transparency were forms of strategy. Deception would weaken him in their eyes, but clarity might earn their respect. Finally, one of the sisters approached and knelt, studying the ground at his feet. She gestured at the soil, the sparse growth of his crops, and then at him. Elias understood. They were assessing not just his actions, but his ability to survive, adapt, and maintain life under conditions that would break most species. "You have chosen compassion over survival," Elias said aloud, though he was not sure if she could hear him in the human sense. I don't know what will come of it. I only know it was right." The day wore on, and as the sun reached its zenith, Elias finally allowed himself a moment to rest. He sat on the edge of his barn, wiping sweat from his brow, and watched the sisters move across his property. They did not speak. They did not make demands. They simply observed, as though the world itself had paused for this moment. Then came a ripple of movement in the distance. A faint hum carried across the plains, and Elias' heart sank. It was the sound of engines, smaller, faster, and more precise than any human vehicle. Whoever had been pursuing the girl had tracked her to Kestrel 9, and now they were closing in, no doubt believing they would find an unprotected settlement, an easy target. Elias stood, feeling the tension tighten in his chest. The sisters noticed immediately. Their attention shifted, a subtle vibration of energy that he could sense more than see. Elias knew that these beings, despite their patience, were capable of immense power, and yet they did not act. They waited. He understood then that humanity's strength was being measured not just in action, but in restraint. If he reacted with fear or aggression, it would mark him as predictable. If he reacted with courage and ingenuity, it would demonstrate the qualities that these sisters valued above all else. Elias moved quickly, preparing his homestead for defense, not with weapons, but with clever traps, hidden pathways, and escape routes only he could know. He reinforced weak spots in the fences, guided livestock to safer areas, and even created false trails across the desert to mislead any trackers. Every action was deliberate, calculated, but also infused with the human instinct to protect and endure. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows that twisted across the desert. The hum of engines grew louder, and the first scouts of the pursuers appeared, glinting like shards of metal in the sunlight. Elias held his ground, refusing to panic. The sisters hovered nearby, their presence a constant reminder that every choice he made was being weighed, every movement observed. The first vehicle slowed, scanning the landscape. The scouts expected an empty homestead, a weak human unable to defend against superior technology. Elias' preparations confused them. Livestock that should have been visible were hidden. Paths that led to safety were obscured. Traps redirected the pursuers' movements. Each small victory bought him time and demonstrated an unexpected mastery of his environment. Then from the distance, a figure appeared, small, riding his horse. The alien girl he had saved returned, her expression calm, determined. She rode directly into the chaos, guiding the pursuers into paths Elias had prepared, and using the horse's strength and speed to outmaneuver the enemy. Together, human and alien, they turned the pursuers' advantage against them, demonstrating a form of strategy no machine or code could predict. The sisters watched in silence, their initial curiosity giving way to awe. Elias understood their reaction. Humans, when pushed to the edge, did not merely survive. They adapted, innovated, and sometimes, in moments of desperation, performed acts that defied logic. His decision to give the horse had not just saved the girl. It had created a bond, a sequence of events that showcased the ingenuity and resilience of humanity in a way no alien could have anticipated. Night fell and the pursuers retreated, confused and frustrated. Elias and the girl stood together, breathing heavily, surveying the landscape that had become a battlefield of cunning and courage. The sisters approached him once more, their presence now more familiar, less imposing. They extended their hands not in threat, but in acknowledgement. "You have shown qualities we did not expect," one of them communicated directly to his mind. "Compassion, courage, strategy, you have earned our attention." It had brought the sisters to Kestrel 9, it had challenged the expectations of an alien culture, and it had demonstrated that humans, though small and isolated, could influence events on a scale that rivaled the most advanced civilizations. The girl looked at him, eyes full of gratitude and quiet strength. Elias smiled faintly, realizing that their fates were now intertwined. Together they had survived the first test, but he knew the challenges were only beginning. The sisters lingered until the stars appeared, their forms glowing faintly in the night. Then, without warning, they ascended, leaving Elias and the girl beneath the alien sky. The desert was silent once more, but the sense of expectation remained. Elias knew that their visit had changed everything, not just for him, but for humanity. As he settled into his bedroll for the night, he stared at the stars, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him. The future was uncertain, and the sisters' attention was both a promise and a warning. Humanity had been noticed, and now they would be tested in ways no one on Kestrel 9 could imagine. Yet Elias felt something that night he had not felt in years: hope. Humanity had survived this far through courage, ingenuity, and unyielding spirit. The universe had underestimated them, but he knew the truth. Humans were capable of greatness, even in the harshest conditions, and they could rise to challenges that would crush others. Somewhere out there in the dark expanse of space, the sisters would remember his choice. They would watch, and the events set in motion by a simple act of compassion would ripple across the galaxy. And as long as humans acted with honor, ingenuity, and courage, they would not just survive, they would thrive. Elias closed his eyes, letting the desert wind soothe his weary body. He did not know what dawn would bring, but he was ready. Humanity had begun to prove itself, and he, in his small way, had started the first chapter. The morning on Kestrel 9 arrived crisp and clear, a rare calm after the chaos of the previous night. Elias Rowe moved through his homestead with a sense of purpose that felt heavier than usual. The alien girl he had saved sat nearby, quietly observing him as he repaired fences and tended the remaining crops. There was no need for words yet. The bond between them had begun silently, forged in survival, trust, and the shared understanding that they had survived the first test. The three sisters remained in orbit, their ships a constant shimmer on the horizon, visible through the dusty haze. Unlike the pursuers from the previous night, they did not descend, did not interfere directly. Their observation was relentless but patient, as though they were studying a phenomenon too delicate to touch. Elias felt their presence even without seeing them, a subtle awareness that stretched across the plains. Every movement he made, every decision he took, seemed measured and catalogued by eyes that could see far beyond human comprehension. As the sun climbed, the girl approached him. She had learned to communicate with Elias not through words, but through subtle gestures, expressions, and finally a series of clicks and sounds that he had come to understand. Her language was alien, but her intentions were clear. She wanted to help. She pointed to the northern ridge, then to the distant desert. It was a warning and an offer of aid at the same time. Elias studied the horizon. Something was approaching again, but this time it was different. The hum of engines carried an unfamiliar cadence, not the chaotic thrust of mercenary scouts, but precise, disciplined, and coordinated. He realized they were not merely pursuing the girl, they were testing, probing, analyzing. Whoever these beings were, they intended to see what humanity could do to gauge its reaction, to understand its limits. He turned to the girl. "We need to be ready," he said simply. She nodded, tightening her grip on the reins of the horse she now rode. Together, they began preparing the homestead, not for defense in the traditional sense, but for adaptability. Traps were set, false trails laid, and safe zones for retreat established. Every action was calculated, every possibility considered. Hours passed in tense preparation. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, the sky shimmered and fractured with light. A fleet appeared, small ships hovering just above the surface, their designs alien but elegant. They landed with precision, forming a semicircle around the homestead, and figures began to emerge. This time they were clearly of the same lineage as the girl and the sisters, but these were different: soldiers, scouts, perhaps even envoys. Their movements were sharp, coordinated, and disciplined, and they did not immediately speak or gesture. Elias felt the weight of the moment. He had expected danger before, but he had not anticipated this. Yet he did not panic. The humans who had survived on Kestrel 9 had always relied on ingenuity over brute force, and now was no different. He guided the girl to lead the horse along hidden paths, using natural cover, and moving through areas he had prepared in advance. The alien soldiers advanced, scanning the ground, but the traps and diversions Elias had laid slowed them, forced them to make choices that exposed gaps in their strategy. He watched closely, noting patterns, weaknesses, and overconfidence. Humanity had been underestimated. The soldiers expected surrender or at least fear. Instead, they encountered coordination, adaptation, and relentless problem-solving. From above, the sisters observed, communicating through subtle shifts in light and energy. Elias could feel their fascination, their acknowledgement that humans were more capable than anticipated. The girl he had saved acted as liaison, guiding the humans' movements and signaling dangers in ways only she could manage. Together, they turned the approaching fleet's assumptions against them, exploiting every predictable move, improvising around every obstacle. Hours turned into the late afternoon. The alien soldiers began to falter, frustrated by the human unpredictability. They regrouped, attempting new strategies, but each one was met with quick adaptation and ingenuity. Elias realized that their focus was not destruction but observation. These beings, despite their military precision, were testing the limits of human creativity, endurance, and courage. As the sun dipped lower, the final phase began. The soldiers paused, forming a wide circle around the homestead. They did not attack, they awaited a response, a decision. Elias understood immediately. The trial had reached its climax. His choices and those of the girl and the horse had demonstrated competence, courage, and resourcefulness. But would it be enough to earn acknowledgement, or had they failed to meet the expectations of these alien beings? In that moment, Elias felt a strange sense of clarity. He stepped forward, alone, unarmed, and into the open desert. The soldiers held their position, sensors trained on him, weapons ready but not raised. Elias raised his hands in a simple gesture, neither threatening nor pleading. He spoke aloud, though he doubted they would hear him in the human sense. We survive because we think, because we adapt, because we care, for ourselves and for each other. We are not what you expected. But if you choose to test us further, you will see that humanity cannot be controlled, only respected. They extended their hands toward Elias, and he felt a flood of understanding, a direct impression in his mind. The debt that had been initiated by the horse was growing, binding, and permanent. His act of compassion had triggered a response that went far beyond the immediate threat. "You have proven more than courage," one of them communicated. "You have shown honor, strategy, and the capacity for empathy beyond your own survival. You have earned attention, not as a subordinate species, but as a being capable of influencing events across worlds." His choice, made in a moment of instinct and compassion, had shifted how an alien lineage perceived humanity. They would watch, protect, and if necessary, intervene, but only if humanity continued to act with honor and ingenuity. The girl rode closer, nuzzling the horse she now trusted implicitly. She seemed to understand the significance of the sisters' message, though she could not yet communicate it fully to Elias. Together, they were no longer just fugitives. They were representatives of a species whose potential was being recognized across the stars. As night fell, the desert transformed into a quiet battlefield of awareness. The alien soldiers retreated, their mission complete not through conquest but observation. Elias and the girl returned to the homestead, exhausted but alive. The sisters remained nearby, luminous against the starry sky, their attention constant and unwavering. Elias sat on the edge of his barn, the desert wind brushing his face. He thought of the horse, the girl, and the choices that had led them here. Humanity had been underestimated, yet in the small, remote corners of the galaxy, its resilience and ingenuity had begun to shine. He realized that this was only the beginning. The sisters' presence meant that humanity would now face trials of greater scale, of complexity far beyond Kestrel 9, but he felt a renewed determination. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, and Elias felt the weight of time and space pressing down. The sisters communicated again, not through words, but through impressions of potential futures. Humanity could rise, adapt, and survive. Humanity could challenge expectations, rewrite rules, and shape destinies. All it required was courage, unity, and the willingness to act without certainty of reward. Elias smiled faintly, feeling the burden and the privilege of being part of this unfolding story. He knew that the galaxy had underestimated humans, but he also knew the truth. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of greatness that no calculations could anticipate. The alien girl watched him with quiet admiration. She had learned that trust, once given, could forge bonds stronger than technology, stronger than weapons, and stronger than fear. Together they had proven that even small actions, a hand extended, a horse given, a choice made in compassion, could ripple across the cosmos. As the night deepened, the sisters finally lifted off into orbit, leaving Elias and the girl alone under the alien sky. Their message was clear. Humanity had been recognized, but the test was far from over. They would watch, they would measure, and they would intervene only if necessary. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges that would test every human quality: strength, courage, ingenuity, and honor. Elias lay back, staring at the stars, feeling both the weight and the promise of what had begun. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger galaxy, one where compassion, courage, and ingenuity mattered more than technology or force. And he, in his small way, had set the course for what might become a new chapter for his species. In the quiet desert, the wind whispered across the plains, carrying the echoes of distant engines, the soft glow of alien ships, and the unshakable truth that humans were not to be underestimated. Elias closed his eyes, letting the stars watch over him, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new opportunities to prove that humanity, in all its stubborn brilliance, could rise to meet the galaxy. And somewhere far beyond the reach of his eyes, the sisters observed, impressed and vigilant, aware that the simple act of giving a horse had begun a chain of events that could change the course of human history. The first light of dawn spread across Kestrel 9, casting long, sharp shadows over the desert plains. Elias Rowe had barely slept. The previous days had been a whirlwind of strategy, observation, and constant vigilance. The alien girl rode silently beside him, her presence a steady reminder that the choices of the past had consequences far beyond what he could see. The sisters remained in orbit, their luminous forms barely visible against the rising sun, a silent promise that they were watching. For weeks the desert had seemed calm, but Elias knew that calm was never true on a planet like this. Somewhere beyond the horizon, forces were moving, preparing to challenge everything he had fought to protect. The hum of engines reached his ears before he could see them, low at first, then rising into a chorus of coordinated power. Scouts had returned, but they were not alone this time. A larger force was approaching, an alien empire that sought to claim Kestrel 9 and, more importantly, to assert dominance over its inhabitants. Elias felt the tension tighten in his chest, but he did not panic. Panic had never saved him, and it would not save the humans who lived scattered across the harsh plains. He looked at the girl and nodded. Together they moved quickly, preparing the homestead for the confrontation they could not avoid. Fences were reinforced, escape routes established, and hidden vantage points identified. Every small detail mattered. The approaching fleet shimmered on the horizon, dozens of sleek vessels descending with precision. Their engines carved trails of light across the sky, their presence undeniable and threatening. Elias studied them carefully. These were not the curious observers of the sisters, nor were they scouts testing human ingenuity. They were invaders, disciplined and confident in their superiority. And yet, Elias knew that technology alone could not guarantee victory against beings who had learned to survive and adapt in an environment as unforgiving as Kestrel 9. He mounted his horse and rode out to meet the girl at a pre-planned vantage point. Together, they guided the local humans from nearby settlements, bringing them to safer areas while also setting traps and diversions. The humans were few, scattered, and poorly armed, but they had something the invaders could not calculate: instinct, courage, and adaptability. Every choice Elias made was a challenge to the invaders' assumptions, a test of human unpredictability. The first wave of ships touched down, sending small assault units across the desert. The humans watched silently, waiting for Elias' signal. When it came, they moved with precision, using the terrain, natural cover, and makeshift weapons in ways that surprised even themselves. They had been underestimated, and that underestimation became their greatest advantage. The alien forces advanced confidently, their sensors scanning for life signs, their weapons trained on the scattered humans. But every predictable move was countered. False trails misled the scouts, hidden traps slowed the advance, and improvised barricades forced them to adapt in real time. Elias felt a strange satisfaction as he watched the invaders struggle. Humanity, underestimated and small, was holding its own. From orbit, the sisters observed with a mix of fascination and restraint. They had not interfered directly, allowing humanity to prove its worth. Now the humans were showing the same qualities that had first caught their attention: courage, ingenuity, and unity under pressure. Elias knew that every action he took, every command he gave, was being recorded in ways he could not fully understand. The humans were not only surviving, they were sending a message to the galaxy that they were not to be dismissed. Hours passed. The desert became a chaotic landscape of movement, light, and dust. The invaders tried new tactics, deploying faster units and heavier weapons, but the humans adapted. They anticipated the patterns, improvised new strategies, and exploited every small advantage. Even the alien girl played her part, moving with agility and precision that guided the humans through the battle without revealing her own limitations. Elias led a small group to flank an incoming wave of assault units. They used the terrain to their advantage, disappearing behind ridges and reappearing in unexpected locations. The alien invaders, though technologically superior, were forced to respond to human unpredictability rather than impose their will. Every successful maneuver strengthened the resolve of the defenders, demonstrating that survival depended not on firepower alone, but on thought, courage, and cooperation. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and the desert air grew cooler, but the tension remained high. The invaders regrouped, assessing the effectiveness of their strategies and preparing for a final push. Elias knew this moment would be critical. The humans had bought time, slowed the advance, and inflicted surprising losses, but the alien forces were far from defeated. He needed to inspire to lead, and to ensure that every human involved understood the importance of the moment. He stood on a ridge, surveying the battlefield. Below him, the humans moved with determination, guided by instinct and a growing confidence. The girl rode past him, signaling that the final wave was approaching. Elias felt a surge of pride. Despite the odds, despite the fear, humanity was standing its ground. The final wave of invaders advanced, heavier and faster than the previous units. Elias' traps slowed them initially, but it was the humans' ability to anticipate and adapt that truly frustrated the enemy. They moved unpredictably, using every advantage the desert provided and striking where the invaders least expected. The battle became a test of endurance, strategy, and willpower, with every decision potentially determining survival or defeat. As the first stars appeared, the tide of the battle began to turn. The invaders, frustrated by the humans' resilience and adaptability, began to retreat. It was not a surrender in the traditional sense, but a recognition that victory would not come easily. The humans had proven themselves capable of more than brute strength. They had demonstrated intelligence, coordination, and courage that no technological advantage could entirely overcome. Elias dismounted his horse, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. He had led humans against a superior alien force and had held the line. The girl approached, nuzzling the horse that had carried them both through the battle. Elias felt a profound sense of connection to her and to the humans he had helped protect. Together, they had achieved something remarkable, something that no outsider could have anticipated. From above, the sisters descended briefly, their presence illuminating the battlefield with a subtle glow. They did not intervene directly, but their acknowledgement was clear. Elias felt the weight of their observation, a silent approval that recognized the humans' courage and ingenuity. The girl beside him understood the significance, and Elias knew that their bond had grown stronger through shared trials and mutual respect. The invaders retreated into the horizon, leaving the humans to regroup and assess the damage. Elias moved among them, offering guidance, reassurance, and encouragement. The humans had survived, and in doing so, they had proven that they were more than just scattered settlers. They were a species capable of ingenuity, resilience, and courage that rivaled any other in the galaxy. As night fully settled over the desert, Elias and the girl returned to the homestead. The sisters lingered in orbit, their presence a reminder that humanity had been recognized, and that the future would hold challenges of even greater magnitude. Elias understood that their acknowledgement was not a gift, it was a test, a measure of what humans were capable of and what they could achieve when faced with overwhelming odds. He sat outside, watching the stars emerge one by one. The desert wind was calm now, carrying with it the quiet assurance of survival. Humanity had faced a direct challenge, adapted, and emerged stronger. The lesson was clear. Courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome even the most technologically advanced threats. The girl sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the starlight and the unspoken understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. Together, they had faced an alien empire, survived its assault, and demonstrated that humans were not to be underestimated. Elias felt a sense of pride mixed with responsibility. The battle had been won, but the war for recognition, survival, and influence in the galaxy was just beginning. Humanity had proven its worth, but it would need to continue to act with courage, ingenuity, and honor if it hoped to secure its place among the stars. The sisters remained above, vigilant and patient, watching, waiting, and understanding that the humans had potential that could shape the galaxy. Elias knew that future challenges would be greater, but he also knew that humans had already shown qualities that no empire, no technology, and no force could easily suppress. As he settled into his bedroll that night, Elias looked at the girl and smiled faintly. They had survived, adapted, and learned together. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but now the message was clear. Humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and capable of remarkable feats. The desert of Kestrel 9 was quiet again, but the sense of purpose and anticipation lingered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new opportunities to demonstrate the strength of humanity. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the wind on his face, the horse resting nearby, and the stars above, knowing that the story of humans and the sisters was far from over. In the silence of the night, he understood one undeniable truth. Humanity had not only survived the confrontation, they had begun to earn their place among the stars, not through brute force, but through courage, strategy, and the enduring spirit that made them uniquely human. The first light of dawn broke over Kestrel 9, spilling pale gold across the desert plains. Elias Rowe stood on the ridge overlooking his homestead, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of movement. The alien girl stood beside him, calm and alert, her eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun. The battles of the past days had tested every ounce of human ingenuity and courage, and yet, despite exhaustion and loss, humanity had endured. Above them, the sisters remained in orbit, luminous and imposing, their presence a constant reminder that the galaxy was watching. They had observed, they had tested, and now they awaited humanity's next move. Elias understood the stakes. The future of not just Kestrel 9, but the reputation of humanity itself, rested on the choices they would make in the coming hours. The remnants of the invading fleet had retreated beyond the horizon, regrouping to reassess their tactics. But Elias knew they would return if the humans showed weakness or fear. The desert was quiet now, almost deceptively so, yet he could feel the tension in the air, like a thread stretched taut across the landscape. He turned to the girl, who had grown more confident since their first meeting. She had learned to navigate human communication, and though their languages were different, they shared an understanding that transcended words. Together, they began organizing the local humans, teaching them to use the terrain, to coordinate movements, and to leverage small advantages against an overwhelming force. Every detail mattered. The angle of a ridge, the placement of a barricade, even the behavior of livestock could be used strategically. Elias knew that survival depended on ingenuity, courage, and unity. Humans could not match the invaders' technology, but they could outthink them, adapt faster than machines, and act with creativity that no algorithm could predict. This was the advantage humanity had always relied upon, the ability to improvise, to innovate, and to endure. Hours passed as the humans prepared. The sisters observed silently, their attention unwavering. Elias felt their assessment in the air, subtle waves of energy that communicated curiosity, expectation, and judgment. They had recognized humanity's potential, but they had also made it clear that this potential must be proven, tested in the crucible of action. As the sun reached its zenith, the alien fleet returned. Their ships moved with confidence, engines humming with disciplined precision. Assault units deployed across the desert, spreading in calculated patterns. Elias and the humans waited, hidden behind ridges, in tunnels, and within fortified shelters. Every movement was deliberate, designed to draw the invaders into positions where human ingenuity could prevail. The first wave of assault units advanced cautiously, sensors scanning for life signs. The humans struck with timing and coordination, using the environment to their advantage. Sandstorms were stirred to obscure movement, hidden traps delayed progress, and improvised barricades forced the invaders to adapt in ways they had not anticipated. The humans moved unpredictably, exploiting the invaders' reliance on technology and rigid strategy. Elias led a small group on a flanking maneuver, guiding them through hidden paths that allowed them to strike the invaders from unexpected angles. The alien soldiers reacted with confusion, their systems unable to account for the human adaptability. Each successful maneuver strengthened morale among the defenders and demonstrated the core truth that the galaxy had not yet fully understood. Humans were resourceful, courageous, and unpredictable. From orbit, the sisters' presence was constant, luminous, and unyielding. Elias sensed their approval, subtle but undeniable. They had not intervened directly, allowing humanity to prove its worth on its own terms. Their observation was both a challenge and a recognition. Humanity could shape events, influence outcomes, and assert its value among the stars, but only if it acted with intelligence, courage, and honor. As the day wore on, the battle escalated. The invaders deployed heavier units, armored machines, and rapid response teams, yet every tactic they employed was countered by human ingenuity. Simple structures became defensive strongholds. Natural terrain became strategic advantage. The alien soldiers were forced to improvise in ways they had not been trained for, revealing flaws in their assumptions about human weakness. The alien girl moved alongside Elias, guiding humans through coordinated maneuvers and signaling hazards. Her knowledge of her people's technology gave the humans a rare insight into the invaders' capabilities. Together, human and alien, they orchestrated a defense that relied not on strength alone, but on intelligence, adaptability, and collaboration. Every human action was amplified by understanding the patterns of the invaders, yet nothing was predictable. By late afternoon, the tide of battle began to shift. The invaders, frustrated by the humans' resourcefulness and adaptability, began to falter. Small victories, achieved through improvisation and courage, accumulated into a momentum that the aliens could not easily reverse. The humans had not only survived, they had demonstrated that technology alone did not guarantee dominance. Strategy, intelligence, and spirit were just as important. Elias moved among the defenders, offering guidance and encouragement. Every decision he made reinforced the humans' confidence. The alien girl rode past him, signaling movements and pointing out threats. Together, they became the central force around which the humans rallied. The battlefield was no longer a place of fear. It was a demonstration of human potential, ingenuity, and resilience. As dusk approached, the invaders recognized the futility of their direct assault. They withdrew strategically, regrouping at the edge of the desert. It was a retreat, not a surrender, but it acknowledged that the humans had proven themselves capable. Elias watched as their ships lifted off, engines humming softly against the wind. The humans cheered quietly, exhausted but triumphant. They had survived, adapted, and overcome an enemy that had believed victory was assured. The sisters descended from orbit, their forms luminous against the fading light. They did not interfere, did not offer gifts or weapons. Instead, they extended their presence as acknowledgement, communicating through subtle impressions that Elias could feel but not fully describe. It was a recognition of achievement, a confirmation that humanity had proven its worth. "You have demonstrated qualities we did not expect," one of them conveyed. "Courage, intelligence, strategy, and the capacity for empathy beyond immediate survival. You have earned not only our attention but our recognition. Your species is capable of influencing events across the galaxy." Humanity, through courage, ingenuity, and collaboration, had survived against overwhelming odds and had reshaped the perception of an alien lineage that spanned light years. The act of giving a horse, simple, compassionate, and selfless, had sparked a chain of events that reached far beyond Kestrel 9. The alien girl approached, nuzzling the horse that had carried her through so much. Elias smiled faintly, feeling the weight of what they had endured together. She had become more than a companion. She was a symbol of the unexpected alliances and mutual respect that could arise from trust and courage. Together, they had not only survived, they had set a standard for humanity in the eyes of the galaxy. The sisters lingered above, observing the humans as they began to rebuild and restore their homes. Their presence was a reminder that vigilance and honor were essential, but it was also a sign of protection and trust. Elias understood that the future held challenges far beyond what he had faced so far, but the recognition he had earned and the example humanity had set would guide them through trials yet to come. Night fell, and the desert was quiet. Elias sat on the ridge, the horse resting nearby, the alien girl beside him, and the stars stretching endlessly above. The humans who had survived the battle gathered in small groups, sharing stories, repairing what had been damaged, and taking comfort in their resilience. They had proven something essential, that humans were not easily defeated, that ingenuity, courage, and cooperation could overcome even the most technologically superior opponents. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, letting the wind carry away his fatigue. He reflected on the journey, the decision to give his last horse, the arrival of the alien girl and her sisters, the tests of courage and ingenuity, and the battle that had reshaped perception across the galaxy. Every moment had been a lesson in resilience, trust, and human potential. In the quiet desert, under the alien sky, Elias understood a profound truth. Humanity's value was not measured by technology, wealth, or power, but by spirit, courage, and ingenuity. These qualities had been tested, proven, and recognized. The galaxy had underestimated humans, but now that misconception had been shattered. The alien girl looked up at him, and in her eyes, Elias saw acknowledgement, understanding, and trust. They had become partners, symbols of a new potential for collaboration between species, a demonstration of how simple acts of courage and compassion could ripple across worlds. The sisters' ships lifted off slowly, ascending into orbit, leaving the humans to their desert. Elias knew their observation would continue, subtle and constant, but their acknowledgement had been clear. Humanity had been tested, and humanity had endured. They had survived, adapted, and proven that they were more than what the galaxy expected. As he lay beneath the stars that night, Elias felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The humans had faced a direct, overwhelming challenge and had emerged stronger, not because of brute force, but because of intelligence, strategy, courage, and compassion. They had begun to carve a place for themselves in the galaxy, not as subordinates or prey, but as equals worthy of recognition and respect. The desert wind whispered across the plains, carrying the echoes of distant engines, the soft glow of alien ships, and the enduring truth that humanity had proven its worth. Elias closed his eyes, letting the cool night air settle over him, the alien girl and the horse nearby, and the stars overhead. The chain of events that began with a single act of compassion, the giving of a horse, had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of humanity. In that quiet moment, Elias knew that the story of humans was far from over. New challenges would come, larger and more complex than any they had faced. But the lesson was clear. Humans were unpredictable, ingenious, and resilient. They could rise to any occasion, outthink opponents, and act with courage and honor when it mattered most. And somewhere in the stars above, the sisters watched, confident that humanity had begun a journey that would change not only their own species, perception, but the destiny of the galaxy itself. A single choice, a single act of compassion had revealed the true power of humanity, not in weapons, not in technology, but in spirit. Elias breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the desert and the promise of the stars. Humanity had survived, proven itself, and earned a place among the stars. And as the night deepened and the first light of a new day approached, he knew that this was only the beginning.